Ladies and gentlemen, it is the night after the first round of the NFL draft, and boy, do we have some stuff to talk about today. Jeremy Brener here, and this is a big day. Again, round two of the NFL draft, and round three are tonight. But before we watch how that goes down, we're going to break down what we saw last night. Can't do this alone, so I've brought some help along the way. Mr. Chris Wolf, how are you today, my friend?
I'm doing good. That was an exciting first round last night, and getting ready to break down what happened.
Yeah, it was an exciting first round, and we broke it down live on the Hitting the Field draft show. So be sure to check that out on the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already, just to kind of see what we do here at Hitting the Field. It's one of our biggest events of the year, if not the biggest event, and we were still able to get it done through Skype. So shout out to Jarrett Kappelman for really moving and shaking to get it done. But we had a lot of fun last night. It would mean a lot if you went to go check that out. You already know what happens, but you get to watch our reactions to it happening. So hey, that's worth something, right?
Yes, yes,
Absolutely.
it is. It was really fun.
So we
Really fun
spent
last night.
we spent almost 4.5 hours talking about what happened last night in the flesh, in the live part of the night. But so, what better way to spend the next day than to spend 2 hours of what we spent 4 hours talking about last night?
Oh, I can never get. This is one of my favorite times of the season. The NFL draft is one of my favorite times of the season of the year in sports.
Absolutely. So um, last night the draft went pretty normal to start out. We didn't see a whole lot of trades, at least in the first half of the draft, up until pick number 22 or 23. We only had one trade, and that was San Francisco trading down from 13 to 14 with Tampa Bay in exchange for a pick swap. San Francisco got a fourth round pick, and Tampa got San Francisco's seventh. Not a whole lot of trades last night, Chris. Did this surprise you?
Um, it a little bit surprised me, but I could also see why teams maybe were hesitant to trade because they weren't able to do all their due diligence like you normally can on some players. So maybe teams were hesitant to trade up for a player unless they were 100% sure that this is who they want.
Yeah, and you know what? I think that this is one of the more talented drafts that we've seen in a very long time. So I think that also had a role in why there weren't very many trades. People saw that they had players that they really liked at their spot, so they just took their best player available. So, Chris, let's get started at the top of the draft. There was talks with Cincinnati about possibly trading, but Cincinnati did the smart thing and they decided to take Joe Burrow, quarterback out of LSU. Um, what do you think Joe Burrow's impact is going to be for the Bengals, and where do you think his career could go?
I think his impact will be. I think it will be pretty good. I think it'll be really good. Um, he obviously has the size, he has the arm strength, he has athleticism and the accuracy. And I think that's something that they also were missing. They were missing somebody. They were just missing a star type player. They haven't had that type of quarterback, and now that they have that with Joe Burrow, and I think he's got some underrated weapons because he's got AJ Green, he's got John Ross, he's got Tyler Boyd, and he's got Joe Mixon at his disposal. And I think having talent like that as a rookie, I think that will bode well for a young quarterback, and I think that it's going to help him a lot. And I think his career, it will all depend on the Bengals front office. Does he continue to put stuff? Does he continue to build the team around him, or does it like end up being like a Cleveland and you just kind of like
All at the seams.
don't really build around the quarterback and end up having to draft another quarterback and another one.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
think it's all in the front office because I think Joe Burrow could have a Pro Bowl type career, I don't know about Hall of Fame, but he's definitely a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback.
Yeah,
I would say.
I think what sets Joe Burrow apart from other quarterbacks is his accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the more accurate quarterbacks that we've seen in a very long time, and that I think bodes him very well. And I think that's why he was the number one pick last night. I think that's why he is there at number one for Cincinnati. I'm curious to see what Cincinnati is going to do later in the draft. Maybe they go and get another receiver for him.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll talk a little bit more about the future of this draft a little bit later on. But let's move on to number two. Obviously, Washington had a easy choice again. They took Chase Young, the best defensive player in the draft. 16 and a half sacks in his last season at Ohio State. How we talked a little bit about this on the show last night, but how can Chase Young change that defense in the nation's capital?
I think that I think it changes it a lot. I think it almost kind of completes a very young defensive front. And you drafted Sweat last year. You've got Payne. Now you have a guy like Chase Young. That's a very nasty front
They
four. They
yeah,
have a nasty front four right now.
they've drafted a lot of young first round picks in recent years. Deron Payne. They've drafted Jonathan Allen. Chase Young now joins the mix. They also have Ryan Kerrigan. They signed Kendall Fuller this past offseason. Matthew Ioannidis is still there. That could work out to be a pretty solid defense. And with Ron Rivera now coaching them,
Mhm.
that's a defensive minded coach that led a very strong defense in Carolina for many years. So I'm excited to see what Washington can do with Chase Young and what they can do with the rest of this draft because they're obviously Chase Young is the tip of the iceberg. I think they're going to have a lot more chances to add some really strong players on the defensive side of the ball, but I'm curious to see if they're going to add more offensive players, this
Mhm.
more offensive uh, skill players, because they need some skill players, particularly at wide receiver, I believe. Um, I think that Washington needs to have a really good draft. This is the first
Mhm.
draft in the Ron Rivera era. They need to hit on a good portion of these picks. I believe they have a good amount of picks. Let me see how many picks they got, but they need to hit on at least like they have 7 picks. Okay, normal 7 picks. So they need to hit on at least 4 of them. Maybe they need to even trade back and get more picks because
Mhm.
the more picks you have, the more chances you have of bringing quality players to your team. So we'll see what Washington does later in this draft. But now we get to Detroit.
This
Detroit
was
was talking about possibly trading out of this pick, and they were talking with several teams. But ultimately, they decided to keep the pick. Did you agree with this?
um I think safe bet yes. Though I think the Lions could have gotten extra draft compensation, but I'm pretty sure the biggest talk was with the Dolphins, and the Dolphins what they were really trying to do was trade 2 to 3 and not swap the picks. I think they were what the Dolphins wanted to do was bundle maybe the 18th and the 26th together with a bundle with other stuff to try to get the 3 from Detroit. And Detroit that would have been a bad decision if they would have done that. So I think they just took a safe route, stayed at 3, got who they wanted, and then just moved on. And I think Okuda that's a great pickup. He's definitely was the number one corner in this draft class. Big physical corner, can play press, and I think he replaces Darius Slay. Big shoes to fill, but I think he's more than capable of doing that.
Yeah, they. I think I sort of I agree with where you're going at. I think that there were several offers on the table, but they wanted to get either Okuda. They would have even settled for Derek Brown,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't have an offer that would guarantee that one of those guys would be there. So I think it was smart for Detroit to do what they did, take the guy that was best fit at number 3. Jeff Okuda is going to be a great player in the league for them. I'm excited to see what he has to offer in Detroit. He could start right away, and That's a good pick for Detroit. It's a good start to their draft class for 2020. Now we move to
Mm-hmm.
the Giants at number 4. They went offensive tackle. Isaiah Simmons still on the board, but they decided to go with an offensive tackle. Did you agree with the move to get Andrew Thomas at number 4?
I think that was a good, safe move. I think that was a good move. I think either would have been a great move because Isaiah Simmons would have made that defense a lot better. But I think they were thinking more of. I think they were thinking more about their future running back and their franchise running back and franchise quarterback. Think that's what the move they were going because they saw Saquon Barkley was literally having to make a lot of the time had to do everything by himself. Like there were like no holes for him, and he would make holes. He would make holes by himself. Daniel Jones didn't have a lot of time to throw, and I think with this pick, he's good at run. He's the most complete offensive lineman in this draft. He can do run. He can run block. He can pass protect. I think this was the safest pick they could have done.
Yeah, I was very happy to see Andrew Thomas come off the board first at the tackle spot. I think he was the best tackle in the draft. The Giants made the right pick here in taking him. The first 4 picks were absolute slam dunks. The Giants
Mm-hmm.
continued that. They addressed one of their biggest needs. Look, I would have been very okay. I would have been fine with them taking Isaiah Simmons. But ultimately, they went for a need, and I think that in 2018 they went with a safe pick, and they went with Saquon Barkley. They were talking about trading out of that pick in 2 years ago because there were so many quarterbacks that teams were trying to trade up to get quarterbacks. But they went with the safe pick, took the best player available. They got Saquon. They got a guy that's going to be that's a 1,000-yard rusher the first 2 seasons of his career. Then last year they went with a risk. They went quarterback at 6. That was a bit of a risky pick. This year they go back to a safe pick, which is I think what they needed, and they get Andrew Thomas at number 4. So
Mm-hmm.
now we move to number 5, and the big debate between Tua versus Justin Herbert was solved last night when Miami took Tua at number 5. Now, Chris, I know you're a Justin Herbert guy, but why do you think Miami went Tua over Herbert?
I think they were. I think they looked back at the Drew Brees thing, passing up on Drew Brees because of an injury history, and they saw how that turned out. And Drew Brees is now an all-time great, first ballot Hall of Famer. They don't want to make that mistake twice potentially because Tua has all the talent. I think Tua is the most talented quarterback in this draft class. It was just the injury history, the risks. I think that they're not going to make that mistake again. I think they're going to take the risk, and I think if he turns out not to get injured, I think it was a great pick.
Yeah,
And I would have picked Tua over. I think Tua is better than Herbert. I will say that. And I think if the Dolphins would if the Drew Brees would have never been passed up, like if that would have never existed, they may have passed up on Tua. Who knows? But I think with that history in the back of their mind, they don't want to screw up twice.
yeah, I think with Tua, look, I'm not a huge fan of the draft class this year for quarterbacks. I think that Tua got hurt so often at Alabama, and that was with a really good offensive line. This is now you're taking Tua away from that offensive line. You're putting him in front of Miami offensive line that's very questionable at best. He got and the fact that it isn't even the hip injury that concerns me. It's the fact that he gets injured very often is what concerns me because
Mm-hmm.
it's not like injury's going to sideline you one way or another, and I'm worried that he's going to spend more time off the field than he is going to be on the field. So to me, that is the risk in it. Now
Mm-hmm.
it's a high risk, high reward because if Tua is healthy, he could be a really quality starter in the league, and he could surprise people, and he could be one of those quarterbacks that you're just like, wow, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of stuff that he does. He did that at Alabama. I remember that national championship very well.
That
That's
was a
what
special moment.
that was like. That is what Tua can be if he's healthy, if he's got a good offense around him, if he's got good coaching around him. I think he's got good coaching around him with Brian Flores. I think he's got. I think it's questionable whether or not the people around him, the offensive line, the skill players, are going to help Tua at the end of the day. And I hope I'm wrong because I think that Tua deserves to have a long, fruitful career. He hasn't done anything wrong to anybody. So I hope that Tua's in for the long haul. But I posed this on the draft last night, on the draft show last night. Do I think he'll be a starting quarterback in 2025? I don't think so. I think that injuries will keep him on the sideline, and the Dolphins are going to realize that a younger quarterback is going to be the way to go for them moving forward. That's me. No, I'm not mad at the pick. I think Miami had to get a quarterback early in this draft. They did that. They got they tried to get Joe Burrow. I applaud them for that. Efforts came up short though, so they got the second best guy, which was Tua Tagovailoa. So now Justin Herbert went 6 to the Chargers, kind of the best player available for them at that pick. Chris, you know Herbert more than anyone at Hitting the Field, so I want to talk to you as to why Herbert went 6th overall in this draft.
The Chargers were in need of a future quarterback because I don't think Tyrod Taylor is the future, but I think he could be the short term, year or two maybe, potentially. But I think they took him because he's a prototypical NFL quarterback, the size, the arm strength, and the athleticism. They haven't really, and I think that is something that it needs to be utilized more. Mm-hmm. Almost like Josh Allen. Because this last season, you saw Josh Allen improved as a quarterback because they utilized his legs a lot more. I think that is something that they could potentially do with Justin Herbert because you saw in the games against Utah and Wisconsin, he ran the ball a lot more than he had during the whole season. And he showed off the legs and he showed off he could be a guy that can get you some rushing yards, get you rushing touchdowns. He's not just the passer. But
yeah,
as the passer, I think he is a little. Everyone says he's inconsistent. Yeah, I watched him for 4 years. Yeah, he had inconsistencies, but also it was almost like the Tua thing. They talked the negative. They didn't talk the positive. There was a lot of positive about Justin Herbert. He can make all throws down the field. People say he can't throw under pressure. There are a number of throws that he made this season, well under pressure, that he put on the money. Against the blitz this season, he had 11 touchdowns with 0 interceptions against the blitz. So he was able to throw under pressure and not turn the ball over. 4-year career, 95 touchdowns, just 23 interceptions. So never threw more than 8 picks in a season. So he took care of the football. In 2 of his last 3 years, 67% plus completion percentage. That's good.
That is very good. I think the concern with Herbert though is just when he was good, he was really good, and that's why he's here at number 6. But when he wasn't good, he really wasn't good.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So high highs and low lows. It's a high risk, high reward situation, and when you're a team taking a quarterback and passing over guys like Isaiah Simmons, like Derek Brown, you have to make sure that this is worth your while. And the Chargers are trying that. They're trying. I hope they don't try and change that offense totally to fit Herbert's style, just because that offense is really good receiver wise. That offense is meant to throw the football.
I think that
they had Melvin Gordon, who was 1,000-yard rusher, Pro Bowler, and yes, he had his whole contract dispute. But once he came back, that there was still Austin Eckler out of the backfield, and he was a receiving back. They have Hunter Henry, who has been in and out of the lineup with injuries, but when he's healthy, could be one of the best tight ends in the league. Keenan Allen is a Pro Bowl wide receiver. Mike Williams has the makeup of a Pro Bowl wide receiver. So that offense is receiver happy. And Justin Herbert could not have gone to a place with better talent. I think that the fit for Herbert is better in Miami, and Tua it's better in LA, just because of what the kind of football that they play and the kind of football that would get the best out of them. I think if you put Herbert in Miami, you would have gotten more of a running. He would have been able to run a lot more versus in Tua in LA, he would have been able to throw a lot more. Um, but I'm curious to see how this is going to work. I think that given the shortened or abbreviated or just different offseason program, that it's going to be very difficult for either of these guys to start week one and to start this season. Very much, at least in the beginning. But
Mm-hmm.
I think once you get to the second half of the season and these teams are no longer in playoff contention, maybe then is when we'll see them get some action and maybe the passing of the torch.
I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And also another thing with Herbert, like at Oregon, that he had to deal with, and what I think it's like I think he was really. I thought it was impressive at how he played through all this. His 4 years at Oregon, he had to go through three different head coaches in 4 years at a college. That is unheard of for a quarterback to go this high, having to go through that much turmoil in your career at school. Like that is, it wasn't until his senior year that he actually got to play with the same offensive coordinator and the same coach
Right. So
for a
now let's
back-to-back season.
let's move to number 7 here. Carolina's on the clock. They have their choice between Isaiah Simmons and Derek Brown, and it was pretty clear that this was who
Mm-hmm.
Carolina was deciding between. And they ultimately decided to go with Derek Brown out of Auburn. Did this surprise you last night that they went Brown over Simmons?
I don't. I didn't surprise me. I think there were more holes on the defensive line than they were in the linebacking. Yes, you lost Luke Kuechly, which is one of the best linebackers in the NFL, but you did not have you had a non-existent a defensive front, like defensive line. You had a non-existent defensive line. You lost almost all your key players on that defensive line, and you needed to fill that void first. I thought, and yes, Isaiah Simmons is the better defensive player. I think Derek Brown will make a more of an. I think Derek Brown will be more of an impact at that position quicker, in my opinion.
Yeah, Carolina. They have. I expect them to go and get an edge rusher probably with the 38th pick tonight. That's certainly a position of need for them. Or a linebacker with that pick. Look, linebacker's a need for them, and I think they will address it pretty early, as early as tonight, to be honest. But I think that Derek Brown is the best interior defensive lineman in the draft, and uh, and we saw that last night. He was the only, other than Javon Kinlaw, it was really between Brown and Kinlaw as to who were the two. Like, those two are head and shoulders above everyone else on the defensive
Mm-hmm.
line in this draft. The defensive line uh, in this draft is not very deep. And I think that was also part of it. Whereas linebacker, it's a little they could get a guy in a later round that could fulfill what they needed at that position a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more than what they could at the defensive tackle spot.
I agree with that. I agree with that because yeah, you're right. The defensive tackles after these two, it's kind of like it's second round picks. It's
Mm-hmm.
day two picks. After these are the only for sure day ones.
Yes.
You may have seen someone like in the 30-32 range maybe at best, but yeah, I thought this was the smarter pick. I think you may have gotten a better reward if you got Simmons, but you got the consistent pick.
And I
That
think
was more.
and I think Derek Brown could be in Carolina blue for a very long time.
Mhm. I
So
totally agree.
I think it's a great pick. But now we get to Arizona at number 8. Everyone was expecting, offense, offense, offense. It's Cliff Kingsbury's offensive minded Cardinals. But They went defense here at number 8. They went with Isaiah Simmons, who they probably didn't expect would be there when the pick was made.
What? I was shocked. I actually, you know what? When I saw that, I was like, man, this could make Kyle Partain very happy that maybe the Cardinals will take an offensive lineman because they definitely need the offensive line because they gave up 48 sacks last year, and that was tied for the most in the NFL. I mean, Kyler Murray was tied for the most in the NFL with Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson. I was like, they'll take an offensive lineman, and the Jags could have potentially just had Isaiah Simmons just fall in their laps at 9. They would have never thought about that. But I'm not gonna. I don't. I'm not saying I hate the pick though with the Cardinals, but I would have taken off as a lineman because you need to protect your franchise quarterback. And I thought their defense was solid
Yeah,
already. I thought they had a solid defense, and the O line was just in more need of help. And they had their choice, but they almost had their choice. I mean, they could have went with Willis. They could have with Jedrick Wills. They could have went with Wirfs. They could have went with Becton. They had their choice, but they took the best available though.
right. I think that the Cardinals did exactly what they should have done. I think this was the pick of the night. Honestly, they really went. They really made the right choice here. They went for the best player available, and I feel like when you're Arizona, a team that, keep in mind, was the number one had the number one pick just a year ago, and they're working on improving that team. They still have a long way to go. But they have definitely taken a step in the right direction by taking Isaiah Simmons here at number 8. Linebacker, obviously not their biggest need, but he could be a linebacker for them. He could be a corner in the nickel for them. He could be a defensive end. He can play a whole lot of different positions for them, and I think that is what makes Isaiah Simmons so special. Is that he can he can morph and he can
Mm-hmm.
be he's a hybrid kind of guy. And I remember Arizona took a guy in the first round a couple years ago, Deion Buchanan. Obviously, did not have the long, fruitful career that he looked like he was going to have at the beginning of his career, but he that's kind of what reminded me of why they went with this pick is because they were able to get a guy that can play multiple spots on the line, and I think that's where I think you're going to see a lot of players like Isaiah Simmons coming up in the league in future years, guys that can play multiple positions, and I think that's going to prove to be very valuable down the line. So I'm really happy with this pick. And I think the Cardinals are on their way to becoming one of the scarier teams in the league.
Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, that NFC West,
The NFC West is the best division in
that
football,
is
and it got better last night.
that
So,
is like, I mean, you have, I to be, if I'm gonna say something, I think the Rams, a team just in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, may be in fourth.
yeah,
I mean, that's how much that changed. The Rams may have just gone from first to fourth in just a matter of 2-3 years.
hmm so let's move on to number 9 here. The Jacksonville Jaguars selected C.J. Henderson here. This was interesting. I read an article before we came on, Chris, about Jacksonville,
Mm-hmm.
and they were going to take C.J. Henderson no matter what, even if Isaiah Simmons was there at 9.
Wow.
They really like C.J. Henderson. Do you like C.J. Henderson as much as the Jags do?
Um, a little. He's definitely good. He's definitely talented. I I am not a huge fan of him because yes, he is good in coverage, but he can't tackle.
Yes.
That's the thing. You need to be able to tackle as a corner because if it doesn't matter. Like there are routes that like on slant routes where it's like yeah, those routes are built for the receiver to catch it, and if you can't tackle, you're going to give up big plays on short passes. Yes, on deep routes he is very good, but on short to intermediates, not as good because he's not tackling in space.
Like
Well,
I could totally see like teams targeting CJ Henderson in like bubble screens and
Hmm.
in like in just screens in general. And that could be an issue. Um, the thing with CJ Henderson is I feel like he's a good CB2. But you're not using the ninth overall pick in the NFL draft to take a cornerback. You're looking for a shutdown corner, and I don't feel like C.J. Henderson has all the tools to be that. I think he does. I think he's very good in coverage. In terms of all the corners in the draft, probably right there with Okuda in terms of coverage. But in terms of just the full package, I don't see it with C.J. Henderson.
Yeah, it's just he's not Jalen Ramsey either. He's not
No,
that type of
he's
corner.
not.
It's just like I mean, yeah, you're trying to draft his replacement, but
And
it.
with no Jalen Ramsey, with no AJ Boye, you expect CJ Henderson. He's probably going to be the top corner, and he's going to go against some very strong receivers. You have T.Y. Hilton in the division. You have AJ Brown in the division. That it's a difficult division in the AFC South for receivers. Good luck for CJ Henderson. He's going to need it.
And don't forget about the Texans. The Texans I think the Texans may be the most difficult
Thank you.
because they
Thank
have a
you.
lot of
I didn't want to
speed.
say it, but I'm glad someone else did.
They have a lot of speed. So
Yes,
it's
they
like you
do.
can run. Those are receivers that will catch short routes and take off.
Teams will overlook the Texans because they don't have DeAndre Hopkins anymore, but that is still a very difficult team to face receiver wise. They have four receivers that could be starters on any team in the league right now. So that's why I
Hmm.
think that's why I think
I mean,
Jacksonville is gonna. I was concerned with this Jacksonville pick, but let's move to number 10 here. Cleveland Browns. They needed a tackle. They took the best tackle on their board, Jedrick Wills, at number 10. Uh, what did you think of this Wills pick here at 10?
I thought that was a good. I thought that was a really good pick. I thought that was the best. I thought that was the best. The Browns, the best pick, the best available pick the Browns could have.
Yeah.
Definitely need the offensive line help because they need to be able to protect Baker Mayfield. They need to be able to run the football with Nick Chubb. They did run really well, despite not having a great offensive line. They ran pretty well. Now they might be able to run even more with more consistency. I thought they weren't consistent. I thought Nick Chubb got his rushing yards in bulk, not in really not in a consistent matter. He would get these long touchdown runs and then get like 2 yards, 3 yards, 1 yard here and there. Now, when you get Jedrick Wills, maybe you can be a little more consistent running the football.
Yeah, I think that look, Cleveland needed to address their offensive line. They did that in free agency with Jack Conklin. They did that here with Jedrick Wills. They now have two brand new tackles that will help protect Baker Mayfield, and I think that was super important. Um, I think I had Wirfs over Wills on my board because
Mm-hmm.
Wirfs could play on either side of the line, but with Jack Conklin there, Jedrick Wills doesn't need to play both sides of
Mm-hmm.
the line. He can play. He can play on one side. Jack Conklin can play on the other. He doesn't need to move around. The Cleveland Browns offensive line looks a lot better today than it did 4 months ago. So I think Cleveland should be very happy with this pick. It was the smart pick, the right pick, and the pick that they got. Jedrick Wills, number 10.
Yep, and I think that offense looks a lot better now
Mm-hmm.
because now you have more time to give the receivers the ball too.
Right.
Because you have Odell Beckham, you have Jarvis Landry, you need to be able to give Baker Mayfield time to get those receivers the ball.
Yeah. And then we had probably the biggest surprise at this point in the draft,
Mm-hmm.
where the Jets were on the clock. We were talking last night on the draft show about how they had all the choices over the receivers, but they ultimately decided to go tackle with Mekhi Becton from Louisville, who with Tristan Wirfs on the board was the reason for that surprise. So Mekhi Becton going 11 to the Jets. Was this a good move for the Jets?
Um, it's not a bad move, but I would have, if I were the Jets, I would have taken Tristan Wirfs over him because Mekhi Becton has a lot of upside, but I still think he's still a little bit of a project because I don't believe he can play the tackles that well. I think he's too big to play tackles. I think he I think he would be more as a guard, though I might see why they did it because he's more of a run blocker. And I think they may want to help Le'Veon Bell get going because a lot of people forget Le'Veon Bell is a starting running back for the New York Jets,
Right.
and Mekhi Becton was a very good run blocker last year at Louisville. Louisville was one of the better rushing teams in the country, and that's part of the reason why he gave big holes to the running backs. But I still would have taken Wirfs because he's more of the all around. He could play both tackles. He was good at run blocking. I just think he was all around the better one.
Yeah, so the Jets, they addressed the offensive line during free agency. They got George Fant out of you're someone you know very well in as
Mm-hmm.
a former Seattle Seahawk. They got Connor McGovern to play center for them. He was originally a Denver Bronco. They did get Chuma Edoga in last year's draft. He started 8 games this season at tackle. So do you think that maybe Mekhi Becton could be better suited for a guard position in the NFL?
As of right now, yes, because of the size. At 6'7", well over the 340, 350, 360. I think he's more. I think he'll be better inside until he slims. If he does, if he slims down, he may be able to go to tackle. But I think for at least the near future, the foreseeable future, I think he should be a guard.
Hmm. I think that Mekhi Becton. I think that was a big reason why he was probably taken over worse. Is that not only can he play on the inside, on the outside, he can be molded into someone that can play on the inside. He has probably like his measurement and just his overall being. He's just a big dude, and that's what you want on your offensive line, especially when you're trying to focus more on running the football. I think that this was a decent pick. I have no problem with it. I could see people being upset for not getting Wirfs over him, but I think that maybe the reason why they got Becton is because maybe they don't want to tackle. Maybe they want to go for someone on the interior line. So maybe that's why Becton was the pick here. I think he will get a chance to play tackle at some point, but they're going to work out for him. He reminds me a little bit of Titus Howard, who the Texans drafted a year ago. The Texans drafted him as a tackle, got some run at tackle, but ultimately was moved to left guard. So maybe that is the case here for Mekhi Becton, but only time will tell. But now we get to number 12, where the Las Vegas Raiders make their first selection as the Las Vegas Raiders, and they had all the receivers on the board, and they decided on Henry Ruggs III. That was a bit of a surprise, Chris.
I was surprised because Henry Ruggs was the number 3 receiver last year at Alabama, behind Devontae Smith and Jerry Jeudy,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately he got picked first out of all the wide receivers. Even though I had and that it was a little surprise, but I mean, I guess John Gruden, Mike Mayock thought that Henry Ruggs fit their scheme better. I think I mean, if that's the only reason that I see that Henry Ruggs was picked first because they just like him better in their offense than Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb.
Absolutely. The Raiders at receiver, it's a bit of a jumbled mess, I would say. There's a lot. They have a lot of guys that have experience in the NFL. Tyrell Williams was their number 1 receiver last year, so they definitely needed to upgrade there. I'm not sure though that Henry Ruggs was the way to go because for me, Henry Ruggs is a good wide receiver too. I think
Mm-hmm.
I think that's his ceiling in the NFL. I don't think he's the kind of guy that's going to get you 1,200 yards in the NFL. I just simply don't. And I think Jerry Jeudy has more potential to be that guy. So that's why that pick was a bit surprising to me. But um, I really can't fault the pick. I think Henry Ruggs is a very talented receiver, and yes, speed kills, and I think that Las Vegas knows that because they play Kansas City twice a year. So
Mhm.
that I think that the fact that Kansas City won the Super Bowl last year, and usually when you see a championship team, you try to model your team around that,
Mhm.
and that I think is I think John Gruden, he's always liked speed and he's always liked players from big name programs, so that's why Henry Ruggs I think made sense for him here. But they're trying to model themselves after the Chiefs here a little bit. I think is they're trying to get fast, and they got faster last night by getting the fastest receiver in the draft, Henry Ruggs.
And I also think maybe there's some untapped potential. Henry Ruggs was the number 3 wide receiver at Bama. So maybe there's like something that we don't know that they think that he can untap potential at as a number 1 receiver because he never got to show it at
Right.
Alabama.
Yeah.
That could potentially be what it is. I mean, we don't. Time will tell.
Also, but when you're the number 3 receiver, you're going up against number 3 corners,
Yep.
and
But
you're gonna have to face better corners in the NFL. So we'll see how he translates. I'm gonna give it like a C minus. I'm not a huge fan of the pick. I think that they could have gotten better. But I understand the pick.
yeah, I agree. An
Yeah,
average, C average. I think that's kind of what it
yeah.
is.
And then after Las Vegas picked Ruggs, San Francisco was on the clock, and they decided to swap picks with Tampa Bay to get, which was a surprising trade because Tampa Bay needed a tackle. They saw Tristan Wirfs still there at 13, and they didn't want to take any chances. They traded up one spot to get Tristan Wirfs at
Hmm.
13.
Yeah, and I think to be honest, I agree. If there's a player that you 100% want, you need to make sure you can do whatever it takes to get him.
To
And
me, there is no bigger compliment than being traded up one spot to go and get you. Even
hmm,
more than being traded up several spots to get you. Because the thing is, at one spot, you could assume that San Francisco was going to go and they were going to pick. They were going to pick a receiver. They were going to pick Javon Kinlaw, basically not Tristan Wirfs, and that Tampa would have had the ability to pick Tristan Wirfs at 14. Yet they were able. They swapped a seventh round of their fourth round pick for a seventh round pick to go and get Tristan Wirfs to move down 3 rounds in a draft to move up one spot. So that's pretty significant. And I think that Tristan Wirfs is going to be able to make a big difference right away in Tampa.
yep, and that's exactly what they needed. They needed somebody. They needed somebody that could play both tackles. They needed somebody that could run block because they weren't a great running team, but they have some talent. They have Ronald Jones at running back, which I think is a little underrated. I think he's very good, and now he can. Now may have more holes to run. Tom Brady can maybe get his play action going. He will be able to throw down the field. I mean, just think he will have time to throw, and this is the best receiving core that Tom Brady has had since '07, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion.
Yeah, it really is. He's got a very talented offense down there in Tampa, and some of it that came in already, and some of it that recently came in with Gronk, and with now Tristan Wirfs. So I'm excited to see what Tampa has in store. But now let's move on to 14. San Francisco. We were talking about how they needed receivers, but we were also talking about it could be Javon Kinlaw, and they traded up into the draft because they dealt DeForest Buckner to the Colts, who were originally slated to pick 13th. So a defensive tackle was definitely a need for them, and they trade that pick to get their defensive tackle of the future here in Javon Kinlaw. What did you think of this pick? I know you called it last night on the draft show, so talk more
I
about it.
called it not in my mock draft, but I called it in person because I had a day to think. And I'm just
And
like,
that's what really matters.
made sense. After thinking and looking at it, it was like now it makes sense. You traded a defensive lineman. You traded someone on your D line that was about to get paid a lot of money for the 13th pick, where you can go draft one of the top 2 defensive linemen, whoever was available, whether it was Derek Brown or Javon Kinlaw. I think they would have taken either. If Javon Kinlaw would have went first, I think that Derek Brown may have been that next one if he was there. I think they would have taken either. But I think the reason why they did this, you were able to get a great talent in Javon Kinlaw, and you're saving millions and millions of dollars over a number of years, not paying DeForest Buckner, and you're still an elite defensive line, and you save cap space.
They got 70 cents to the DeForest Buckner dollar. Is Javon Kinlaw, and that basically means that Javon Kinlaw, he's not as good as DeForest Buckner, at least right now. He has the potential, I think, to become that, but he's a better value for you, money wise, at that pick. He brings 70% of or better than what DeForest Buckner brought, and doing it for a fraction of the cost. So once again, the Niners with another savvy move here in the draft, Javon Kinlaw to the Niners at 14. So let's move on to 15 now. Denver, they see Jerry Jeudy on the board. They open their mouths, and once they pick up their jaw off the floor, they send then that pick to the commissioner.
Yep, I was the same way. I did not see Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb at about the midway part, close to the midway part of the draft. Both of them still being on the board. Like, I did not see that coming, and I love this pick. It gives Drew Lock another downfield threat. Now he's got 2 wide receivers in Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, along with tight end Noah Fant, with Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon at running back. That is a very, very underrated and cheap offense.
Yeah. I think that Jerry Jeudy is the likeliest person in this receiver class, in this very deep receiver class, to be a wide receiver 1 in this league. And I think he will be in Denver. He's got the positioning for it. He's got the young quarterback for it. He's got the system for it, I think. The best route runner in the draft, which ultimately is not what the Raiders wanted. And I think it's going to be very interesting. Jerry Jeudy is going to get to play the Raiders twice a year for the foreseeable future. I guarantee you that Jerry Jeudy is going to have better games against the Raiders than any other team in the league, simply for the fact that they took his teammate instead of him.
Oh, yeah. And you know what the thing is? Cortland Sutton was just a Pro Bowler this year.
Yes.
So you have a Pro Bowl wide receiver. You just added another potential Pro Bowl wide receiver. And whether Jeudy goes up against number 2 corners or Cortland Sutton, that is going to be something else. I think for the first year, I think Jerry Jeudy will be the 2 for at least like maybe the first year, just to get acclimated with the offense. And because Cortland Sutton's the more experienced person, but that's going to be hard to stop because Jerry Jeudy going up against number 2 corners, he didn't get to do that in college. He was always going up against the top corners. Maybe for the first year, he may go up against number 2s and thrive in that.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget, Noah Fant is a wild card here because he is a tight end, but he runs routes and he plays like a wide receiver.
Yes. It reminds me a lot of when Denver had Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
In a way. Both of those guys could be wide receiver 1s on any given day. And Denver has that yet again with the adding of Jerry Jeudy to their roster last night. So now we get to Atlanta here at 16. Atlanta was talking about trading up, and I read something today that I wanted to discuss. So Atlanta was talking about trading up. They didn't have enough pieces, that they didn't want to sacrifice too many pieces to trade up into the top 3 to get Okudah. They didn't want to, and Detroit wasn't willing to trade that far down. And the Giants were content with where they were. Miami and the Chargers were going for quarterbacks, so they were out. Carolina, they weren't going to trade with because that's an interdivision trade. You're not going to see very many trades between teams within the division. Arizona saw Simmons there and were like, sorry, bud, we're not going to do that. Jacksonville, then they wanted C.J. Henderson, but they knew that Jacksonville was going to take C.J. Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
So they were left with the next best corner on the board, with his A.J. Terrell out of Clemson. He's actually from Atlanta, so that must have been very exciting for his family that he gets to stay home for the beginning of his NFL career.
Um, yeah, I don't know if I would have said that AJ Terrell was the best available corner right then, but I think they may have saw issues maybe with Christian Fulton that were off field, maybe not on field. I That might be why he's dropping, is because of off field issues, and and if you combine with that, I was like, but then there was also Jeff Gladney. I thought he could have been here as well. It could have been a good fit as well with this team. But I guess in the end, they just liked this fit more. Though kind of reminds me of a Desmond Trufant. He's kind of built like him.
Yeah, and I think that's why they ultimately went with Terrell here. I mean, look, 6 cornerbacks were drafted last night. None of them were named Christian Fulton. So I think that, but also A.J. Terrell was a corner that was rising up boards in the last month. Where he was more seen as someone that you take in the 30s. Then you were thinking, okay, maybe you take him in the 20s. I saw him mocked as high as 19 at points during the process. But ultimately, considering the fact that Atlanta was very active for a corner, they took the best corner available according to them, and I think that they were right. I think that A.J. Terrell, he was my 3rd best cornerback in this draft. So I'm happy that Atlanta picked the right guy here. I can see why fans might be frustrated because you could have gotten A.J. Terrell maybe a little bit later in this draft. Maybe they could have traded back, gotten some more draft capital, but you got a good receiver at 16. I'm not convinced A.J. Terrell's going to be this prolific corner in the NFL, but the thing is, corners were seen as a valuable commodity last night. 6 of them went in the first round. So
I was surprised about that.
Yeah, that was a big surprise. And there were some corners last night that people thought would be first round picks. Trayvon Diggs, Christian Fulton being some of them. Jalen Johnson could have gone.
Jalen Johnson, he's one of my favorites actually.
Yeah, so they were not first round picks. So that was a bit of a surprise, but I think that A.J. Terrell was the right pick for them, and I hope that I'm right. I hope that I'm right. But now Dallas is on the clock, and Dallas, there was talks about them going with front 7. Kayvon Chasen was mocked to them very often. Xavier McKinney was seen as a potential pick, but they ultimately take CeeDee Lamb, which was their best player available regardless of need. They didn't need a receiver, but CeeDee Lamb is one of the most talented players in this draft.
Yeah, this had Jerry Jones written all over it. This pick had Jerry Jones written all. This was a Jerry Jones pick. I mean, this was like they wanted the star pick. They wanted the star player that would sell tickets. Because let's be real, Xavier McKinney, Christian Fulton, they weren't going to sell tickets, but they were more of the needy picks because their secondary, let's say it, they are not good. It is one of the bottom 10 worst secondaries in the league. You just lost your best corner. You safeties aren't that great. Your corners aren't great. But in the end, you want to sell tickets. And that's exactly what CeeDee Lamb is going to do with that offense. But I think but hey, with no safeties going in the first round, they could still go up and get a pretty good corner or safety since the corner depth is pretty big and no safeties were taken. So there's still Grant Delpit, there's still McKinney, there's still a couple others in the safeties. So
Dallas's first pick tonight is at 51. The safeties.
Chance that something will be there.
Yeah, Antoine Winfield also. That's someone we haven't mentioned yet. Is going to be there.
I actually think he has the best chance to be I think Antoine Winfield is going to be the best safety.
I think he's the best safety in this draft too.
because at the end of an NFL career, at the end of their careers, I think Antoine Winfield will be better than McKinney or Delpit
I agree.
after watching the film because he can play corner and
I
safety.
agree, and that helps. And I was thinking with now that we're on the subject of Antoine Winfield, I was thinking that at 31 last night, I was like, wow, how cool would it be if Antoine Winfield went to Minnesota at the 31st pick? I thought there was a chance. They needed secondary help. Antoine
Play for the
Winfield's
same,
dad was a
play for the
three-time
same, yeah, for
All-Pro
the same
with the
team.
Vikings. That could have been really interesting. Ultimately, they went elsewhere with the pick. We'll talk about the Vikings shortly, but let's move back to Dallas. So CeeDee Lamb, I think that the receivers in this class, it doesn't matter about where they go, whether it's a first round pick, second round pick, third round pick, 17th overall, 12th overall. It matters about fit. Fit is the most
Mm-hmm.
important thing. And if
Yeah.
I'm CeeDee Lamb, I'm listing you as one of the losers of this draft because CeeDee Lamb could have been a wide receiver one had he been picked 2 picks earlier in Denver, or he could have been or 5 picks earlier in Las Vegas. He goes to Dallas, and I'm sure he's happy to be in Dallas. It's close to home for him. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboy brand, he's part of it. But he is sitting behind at least Amari Cooper in that depth chart, and possibly even Michael Gallup. I wouldn't like. That's the thing is this was definitely not the biggest need for the Cowboys. They needed to go. Their needs lied on the defensive side of the football. They ultimately went
Mm-hmm.
offense. So to me, I think that I love what you said about Dallas because I totally agree with you. This was a Jerry Jones pick. He told the scouts, "Don't talk to me tonight." And he said, and because the scouts would have said, "Jerry, this is like you need to go for this guy, this guy. You need to go for
Mm-hmm.
Chase on. You need to go for Xavier McKinney. These are the guys that are going to help us more." They said, "No, I want to sell tickets. I want CeeDee Lamb. He's going to be, he's going to be good for us for a while." And don't get me wrong, I think CeeDee Lamb could have a very good career in Dallas. It's just going to be harder for him to get higher on the depth chart, considering the fact that Amari Cooper is already paid
A lot of
for the
money.
next 5 years. Michael Gallup might be also a loser in this draft because he's got competition for that wide receiver 2 spot. But ultimately, I see CeeDee Lamb taking the role that Randall Cobb had in last year's offense, where he was the slot receiver. And he's a better slot receiver than Randall Cobb is right now. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an upgrade. It helps Dak Prescott for sure, but yeah,
I agree. I agree with that. I
yeah.
think
We've talked way too
I.
much Dallas. I can't stand any more Dallas talk. But anyway, Miami's on the clock now, and they had the 18th overall pick. This was originally the Pittsburgh Steelers pick, but they ultimately went with Austin Jackson, offensive tackle out of USC. With all of these, with 4 tackles going in the top 13 picks, tackle was clearly a hot commodity in this draft. And when you get Tua at 5, you need a tackle to protect him. They did that at 18 with Austin Jackson. Did you like this pick, Chris?
I liked it. I like this pick. I actually my last mock draft. I believe I mocked Austin Jackson to the 18th to the Dolphins, and I think this was a good pick. This was a really good pick for them. Good offensive lineman. One of the I think was the best. He was the best offensive lineman. I think that's what you need to do. I think that's what the Dolphins were planning on doing. Way. I think at 18 they were going to take whoever the best offensive lineman was available. I think that's what the plan was,
Mm-hmm.
and they did just that. They did everything on schedule. What they were going to do tonight, and I think it was a solid. I give it a B plus.
Yeah. You did mock Austin Jackson to the Dolphins at 18. Props to you on that one. Um, but I think Austin Jackson. I think the jury's still out on him. He's gonna have to. He's gonna get the opportunity though to play, and I think that is ultimately why he's very happy right now. He should be. He's gonna get a chance to start. probably week one for the Dolphins at tackle. He's going to protect whoever they're going to put back there. I doubt it's going to be Tua to start, but he's going to be there, and he's going to have the chance to become the franchise tackle that Laramie Tunsil was becoming for them before he was traded away to Houston. But you needed to get offensive tackle checked off your list, and you got one. So I can't fault them. Maybe you go for a different guy. I know Josh Jones was a potential pick there. That's what the HTF Collective mock had. But I can't see Austin Jackson being that much of a downgrade from that. I don't even or an upgrade. I really there wasn't enough for me to differentiate the two. It's not one is clear over another. You might ask a pool of 10 scouts, and they might say that 5 might say that Josh Jones is the better prospect, and 5 might say that Austin Jackson is the top prospect. This is when the draft starts to really take shape, and you start seeing teams go for the players they've really scouted. And I think that Austin Jackson was there, one of those guys from Miami. Do you think that they could have gotten him at 26?
I am not 100% sure, because I'm not 100% sure that potentially could have, but I did feel that maybe New Orleans might have taken him at 24.
Maybe.
That was a potential. They could have, because New Orleans was apparently wanted to go offensive line, which was a little bit head scratching, but we'll talk about that,
Yeah.
obviously.
Speaking of a head scratcher, the 19th overall pick made by the Las Vegas Raiders was Damon Arnett, someone that a lot of people had very little knowledge of. The only person to even mention him in any mock draft out of any of us here at Hitting the Field was Nick Geddes. So I do have to shout out. That was probably one of the more impressive decisions on anyone's mock throughout the process. But Damon Arnett, for even Nick Geddes, was the 25th pick in his mock draft. But he goes 19, a top 20 pick again for Ohio State.
It was a little surprising, but I've watched a decent amount of Ohio State football, and David Arnett he's really good. It's like he would be the best corner on almost every team in the country this year. He would have been on about 95% of the teams in the country. He'd probably be the best corner, but because he had the best corner in the country on his team, he got overshadowed. But I mean. Hey, that is who the Raiders liked, and you can't deny him, or you just got to tip their hat and say, hey, we scouted this guy for weeks after the combine. We like this guy, and we are going to take him, even though he may be ranked as a second round pick. It doesn't matter. We think he is this good.
Yeah, the Raiders have a tendency of doing this, of going for guys that are probably not guys that you would take at that pick, but they really don't care where they are in the draft. They're going to take the guy that they want. That they showed that with Henry Ruggs at 12. They showed that with Damon Arnett here. They've shown it in the past with guys like Cleveland Farrell, guys like Colton Miller. Come to mind. They've done that again here with Damon Arnett. And I think that, look, they took the guy they wanted. And look, you can say, oh, well, Damon Arnett he probably would have been CB1 anywhere else in the country. But, I mean, look at what he did as the cornerback 2 in the draft. He was the 19th overall pick. I mean, you can't get much better than that. I mean, and he was the 4th corner taken. The only places that he would have, who knows? Maybe if he was a CB1 elsewhere, maybe he would have been exposed. So I don't know. I mean, but I think this is interesting now that we've seen we saw 2 Alabama receivers go in the top 15. We've seen 2 Ohio State corners go in the top 20. We saw 2 Georgia tackles taken in the top 30. What does that say about the draft process? That multiple guys that play the same position at the same school are going this high in the draft.
I mean, that it may have to. I would tip my hat to the coaching staffs at each school. They are able to coach these kids up to be great, because Georgia, you could say between him and Oregon, had the best offensive line in the country. So they had talent everywhere on the O line.
Mm-hmm.
And same with Ohio State. Ohio State is one of the best secondaries in the country. Why? Because they coach defense really well. Same thing with wide receivers at Alabama recently. I mean, they had 2 more. 2 more might be going in the top 15, top 20 in another draft for Alabama.
Yeah, I'm looking up the college football playoff. I want to see how many of these players in the top 32 played in or had their school play in a college football playoff game in the last 4 seasons. So we look at so let's look at this year first. Okay, so this year LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, and Oklahoma. So just this year alone, these are the people that played in the college football playoff: Joe Burrow, Chase Young, Okuda, and then you had to go Isaiah Simmons. Jedrick Wills was Alabama. They didn't go this year. That's the thing is a lot of Alabama guys. AJ Terrell, CD Lamb, Damon Arnett, Kayvon Chason. That's 8. Justin Jefferson 9. Kenneth Murray, Oklahoma. That's 10. 10 guys. Patrick Queen 11. That's 11 guys.
That's
and Clyde Edwards-Helaire 12.
Over a third. Over
a third of the players played in the college football playoff this year. Then you add Alabama from last year, so that's Tua, that's Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, and that's 3.
Jedrick Wills.
And Jedrick Wills, that's 4. So that's half of the players in this draft that have played in the college football playoff the last 2 years.
That is something.
Yeah. And then you can add Andrew Thomas and Isaiah Wilson to that list if you go back another year.
Wow. That is something that it's just it pays dividend to make the college football playoff, because you get a lot of national stage. And who knows, a guy like Justin Herbert, if he would have never lost the ASU game, he would have had his chance against Joe Burrow potentially on a national stage.
Yeah, it's a sight. I think that we're seeing now is the college football playoff is crazier than ever. And the school that got the most picks in the draft was LSU. One of those guys, Kayvon Chason, goes number 20 to Jacksonville. I also read something today about Jacksonville. If C.J. Henderson was they were willing. If C.J. Henderson went number 8 last night to Arizona, or someone traded up to get C.J. Henderson, like Atlanta, and C.J. Henderson was there. If Jacksonville was at 9, they would have taken Kayvon Chason at 9. They really liked Chason. They really like Chason.
I
read that from NFL.com.
That is very surprising. That would have been a little bit of a, I don't know about a reach, but it would have been a slight reach.
It would have been a big reach. It would have been a big reach. The fact that he was at 20, look, that was, in my opinion, a great pick at 20. A great pick at 20, because he was someone that we were mocking in the teens, and he ultimately, I think Dallas, it was between him and Lamb at 17, and Jerry Jones opted for Lamb, And Kayvon Chason is going to get a chance to play a lot in Jacksonville, considering the fact that Yannick Ngakoue is not going to put on a Jacksonville Jaguars uniform again. So this is kind of the replacement for him in a sense. What do you think that he's the best edge? What makes him the best edge rusher outside of Chase Young in this draft?
Um, it's just his quickness, athleticism, his ability to get off the ball, and he can also do some. He's an edge rusher, but a guy that can also play a little bit of coverage at times. I mean, he can play linebacker a little bit, but he's mostly an edge rusher. And I think this where he went right now was perfect. I actually, in my own opinion, I wish the Jags would have passed him because I felt like he would have dropped to Seattle at 27. And I would have loved that.
Yeah. He wasn't going to drop that far. In fact, I think a team would have traded up for him by now. If Jacksonville did not get him, he could have also possibly even been the pick. Yeah, I think Minnesota could have gotten him. A team would have traded up to get him. Kayvon Chason, for him to go 20 was a bit low for him, in my opinion. I think that he's got the ability. He might not necessarily be a big sack guy, but he's a big pressure guy, and I
Hmm.
think that's important. Is not only to have just big sack guys, but have big pressure guys. And you're pairing him with Josh Allen, who the Jags got a year ago in the first round. So I think the Jags have a really good pick here. I like this pick a lot better than I did the C.J. Henderson pick. Uh, More so because I think C.J. Henderson at 9 was a bit of a reach. But I think that Kayvon Chason they got a steal here at 20. So I'm really happy to see that Jacksonville is making at least a good decision for every bad decision they make.
Hmm. I agree. That's good. I mean, they need to revamp this defense. I know they need some wide receivers, so they can get that in the second round.
Hmm.
I think defense was a little bit bigger of a need
Yeah.
because of the amount that they're just losing. I think that is the key. That's the difference. Of how much they've lost.
Hmm. Philadelphia is now on the clock at 21. This was maybe the best part of last night's draft show. We were very much anticipating the Philly pick. Jarrett Kapperman was really hoping Justin Jefferson was the pick, and it was a wide receiver he got, but it was not Justin Jefferson. It was Jalen Rager, and Justin Jefferson would then go the very next pick, 22, to Minnesota. I saw a lot of comparisons, obviously, between Jalen Rager and Justin Jefferson. They play the same position. They were on teams that, in my opinion, are very similar. Philly and Minnesota have had, they were in the NFC Championship together just 2-3 years ago. So I could even see this as a rivalry. But I found a tweet last night right after the draft. I sent it to Jarrett to make him feel a little bit better. But it's from Joe Giglio Sports. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. But basically, it was about percentage of accurate passes thrown in their direction. Justin Jefferson being at LSU and having just Joe Burrow as his quarterback, 69% of passes were accurate that were thrown his way. Jalen Rager at TCU, 31%. And he was the last player listed on this list of potential receivers. So that makes it seem like Jalen Rager, with a better quarterback, like a Carson Wentz, he could make some noise in Philly.
Oh yeah, definitely. I did say last night I didn't. This was the worst one. That was the worst pick of the draft. It was partially just because Philly. It was like you just thought Philly wanted Jefferson this entire time, and they just didn't take him. That's the reason why I said it was the worst. 'Cause I just thought you just didn't take who you wanted. Your guy was right there, and you didn't take him. But I do agree with you with Rager. I've seen highlights of Rager. A lot of Rager's catches are literally jump balls. And it's just like you're just throwing it up and you're just letting him go get it. That was a lot of what his offense was. That and tunnel screens.
Yeah, I know that Philly's going to give Howie Roseman and company a hard time with this pick. considering the fact that Justin Jefferson was on this board, and they probably weren't expecting Justin Jefferson to be here at 21, but Jalen Reagor was someone that was climbing up draft boards pretty quickly, and but it was a bit of a question mark as to whether or not he would be going off the board last night, and he did.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's I actually really like this pick for Philly. I think that Reagor, although Jefferson is probably the higher ceiling, I think Reagor could be 1,000-yard receiver for them. I do. I think that put him in the right system, and he could go and get you. Some plays, some big plays. He's a big play receiver, so he's a guy that you throw it up and he can go get it.
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree with that. And I had a in going with that, I think Minnesota was set on taking Rager. I think that's who they wanted, but but that's who I think that's who they expected to take. That's what I felt like. I felt like Minnesota was going to be expecting, oh, we're going to take Rager at 22.
Mm-hmm.
But then they see Jefferson fall, and it's like that's a no-brainer now.
Yeah, the Vikings. It seemed like Rager and Jefferson were really the guys that they were looking for. It would have made a lot of sense if 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 Rager was the pick at 22, and I think that Vikings fans would have been pretty okay with that. But not only do they get Justin Jefferson, who according to draft analysts was the better player. I don't know. What do you think, Chris? Who is the better player between Rager and Jefferson, and who is in a better position to succeed? That's two different questions. I hope you understand that. There's two different questions.
Okay, the first question, who's better? I think Justin Jefferson is slightly better than
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Rager because I think they both can high point the ball very well, but I think Justin Jefferson is just I think all around better. I think he has more skill sets. I think Jalen Rager is more of like a burner type guy. He uses his speed a little more than he uses a lot of speed more than just route running. I don't think he ran a lot of routes at as many routes at TCU as Justin Jefferson did at LSU. I think that maybe played a part of it. I think that it plays a part in why I think Jefferson's better. And now again, the second question, I think Justin Jefferson is going to do better in Minnesota than Rager does in Philly because Justin Jefferson was the number 2 wide receiver at LSU last year behind Jamar Chase, and he didn't mind it at all. He did not mind playing as a number 2 wide receiver and he thrived in it. And Minnesota, he will be the number 2 wide receiver after Adam Thielen. Again, Justin Jefferson is used to playing in that role, unlike a Stephon Diggs, which was a 1A 1B. That was a 1A 1B type thing. I don't think you're going to get a bad relate. I don't think you're going to have a bad relationship between the quarterback and wide receiver. I think they're all going to be happy. Not to say that Jalen Rager won't be happy. I think Jalen Rager will play well in that offense. I just think it's not as good of a fit as Jefferson with Minnesota.
Yeah, I think that Ray obviously look, Jefferson is the higher ceiling, and it's more of a you know he can play right away and fill that Stephon Diggs role pretty quickly. And Rager is interesting because that receiver core for Philly is dilapidated at best. So it's very uncertain as to where they're going to go. They got injured a lot last year.
Mm-hmm.
Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, and you don't know where they're going to be this year. Alshon Jeffrey, may or may not like playing in Philly, so he might not. Maybe he won't be on the team come season time. But I don't know. I think Rager has potential also to be a very good player. So I wouldn't be upset if I were Philly. I can understand it, but I don't think that the outcry is worthy. Is matches what it should be.
I think some of their fans just have not watched Jalen Rager much.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
They've
and
watched
that's
Justin
also true.
Jefferson a lot. They
That's also
watch
true.
Justin. They watch Justin Jefferson all the time because they're always on. They were always on prime time because LSU was so good and TCU was not good. They were a 5-win team. They didn't. So like not many people watch them. But if you watch Jalen Rager, he had the talent. He has all the talent in the world to be a first round pick. And I believe he was. I knew he was a first round pick. I
Yeah,
just thought you should have taken Jefferson because he was there. Now, if Jefferson wasn't there, the pick would have been fine to me.
yeah.
It's still not bad. I wouldn't have thought. I wouldn't have thought less about it. I would have thought. I would not have like been more on it
Hmm.
if Jefferson wasn't there.
Yeah. Now let's move on to 23. This was the first major trade of the draft, where the New England Patriots traded out of 23 to get an extra second and third round pick, uh, so that the Chargers could slide in and select Kenneth Murray out of Oklahoma, one of the cleanest prospects on the board. And Kenneth Murray, what do you think about the fit and the need for linebacker for the Chargers?
I think this was I like this pick. I like this pick because now you've got a player that you can command on the linebacker. You've already got the defensive end in Joey Bosa. You've got Derwin James in the secondary. Think you got a leader. I think you got a leader on all three phases of the defense now, and that and in a way that's a helpful thing for a guy like Justin Herbert. Now he has a defense that he can lean on. Remember a guy like Russell Wilson with Seattle. He leaned on his defense. He wasn't asked to do a lot. He was a game manager for his first three seasons in the NFL. This can maybe be something like Justin Herbert can have with the Chargers. Now that he has a defense that's really good, he may not be asked to do a lot early on, and he can ease his way into an NFL system. I think this helps defense and offense, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
in a way. Hypothetically, the offense, because maybe it can be you can play like a game. You can do game management. You can manage the offense more instead of having to be relied on.
Yeah, I think that Kenneth. Look, they traded up, I think 14 picks
A lot
to
of
get
spots.
Kenneth Murray. That is also a big compliment. I talked about earlier about how it's a compliment for it's a compliment to be traded up for one pick, but to be traded up for 14 picks, that's impressive. And the fact that Jatavis Brown left in free agency, the
Mm-hmm.
Chargers did need a linebacker. They needed to address it. They could have gone in the second round and gone after a guy like that. There were several linebackers they could have gotten in round
Zach Bond is
two.
one of them.
Yeah. But they ultimately decided they didn't want to wait that long to go and get one. They wanted the best linebacker on their board. They got Kenneth Murray. I really like this pick for them. I like it better than the Herbert pick. That defense is going to be scary once they're all healthy with Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram and Derwin James, Desmond King, Chris
Mm-hmm.
Harris. I could go on and on and on. That
It
defense is
is.
scary.
It is.
And that AFC West is, we talked about the NFC West, but the AFC West too. I mean, they got obviously Kansas City, but LA is making moves to where they can work their way up. Denver's making moves to work their way up. I really like what they're doing, and Las Vegas ain't bad themselves either. So the AFC West is probably one of the more interesting divisions of football, especially after the addition of Kenneth Murray to LA last night. So now we move on to number 24, and we go
Mm-hmm.
to one of the more surprising picks last night. The New Orleans Saints, they selected Cesar Ruiz, interior offensive lineman out of Michigan. And I know you weren't a big fan of this pick, Chris. Why is that?
Their offensive line is really good, like already. I mean, Drew Brees is one of the least sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, I just was like, that's why I was kind of like a little surprising. I thought they would have maybe went with someone like Patrick Queen that they needed to address a little bit on the defense. I thought they should have went that direction. I and get back to that. I think the Chargers may have traded that far up because maybe they were scared that maybe they traded this far up because maybe the
because
Saints
they thought the
weren't
Saints
eyeing
would take
a
him.
Kenneth
Yeah,
Murray. That could have been why, because maybe they thought about trading up, but they thought maybe if they could maybe wait a little bit. But then they saw that the Saints ahead. I was like, maybe they were going to take them. So it's like I think that's why they may have done it. But and that might have been why they took Cesar Ruiz, because maybe they don't think as highly on Patrick Queen as
yeah,
potential.
yeah.
Which
Patrick Queen was someone we were talking about here as the pick. They were looking for some linebacker help. Ultimately, though, Ruiz, although it might not have been their biggest need for the Saints, it was definitely a need they needed to address. With Larry Warford in the last year of his contract, so with Larry Warford in the last year of his contract, it means that Ruiz, someone that can play center or guard, could be that fill-in replacement for Warford when he moves on.
yeah, and yeah, I agree with that. And it's a cheap. It's a cheap thing because
Yes,
offensive linemen, people don't really always love to give extensions to offensive linemen. You don't see as many huge extensions to them.
exactly. And the thing with Cesar Ruiz is he was seen as a top pick. And if someone took him, then you weren't going to really be able to get a guy of value until maybe the third round tonight, where Lloyd Cushenberry out of LSU is probably your
Mhm.
next best option at the center position. So I can see why the move was made in a class of in a very shallow class for the interior offensive lineman. You went for the best guy available, so I can't really fault them here. Although it might not have been the biggest need in terms of position, uh, Ruiz is Ruiz could be a long term starter for the Saints moving forward. So can't be too mad at that pick.
I can't. Yep,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. That they do need that was a need, and yeah, the center position that's
Hmm.
very shallow. Like there are not many centers that are highly sought after.
Yeah. After we saw the Chargers pick this Chargers trade, we saw two trades here. The two trades to close out the night. First was San Francisco, which was which was actually probably the biggest surprise in my opinion, in terms of teams trading with San Francisco. This was their second trade of the night. But a team like San Francisco that has very few picks to begin with. They only had, I believe, 5 picks to begin the draft. They only
Hmm.
have 3 picks for the rest of the draft, and none before round 5. So the fact that they traded for up to get Brandon Ayuk out of Arizona State, it shows you how much they really like him.
Yeah, because that's they traded 6 spots up to draft a wide receiver that was considered not even the top. I wasn't even a top 5 wide receiver. Traded 6 spots up for the sixth pick receiver. I mean, that's a lot. I think that's a lot to trade up for. And don't get me wrong, I think he was really good. He was the best wide receiver. He was over 1,000 yard receiver. He played with a true freshman quarterback, so it was like, and he had over 1,000 yards or about 1,000 yard ish. So it was like, and his biggest moment was obviously against Oregon when he caught that long touchdown to crush the playoff hopes of Oregon.
Yeah.
That was
So
one of his big moments.
they traded to Minnesota the 117th pick in the draft, the pick that San Francisco acquired to move 1 pick down from Tampa. They got that pick, and they acquired a late 5th round pick as well.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota now holds 14 draft picks this weekend, including the 2 they already made with in the first round. So that's a lot of picks for
Well,
Minnesota. I really
well,
like
yeah.
how they got out of this, what they got out of this trade. But I mean, look, Ayuk, um, there was no guarantee that he was going to be there at 31. So I understand the logic behind trading up. Um, my thing is this, though: you have very few draft picks now.
Mm-hmm.
And look, and I expect them to do more trading this weekend. My guess is that they were trading up. They have to probably trade at least one, if not both, of Marquise Goodwin and Dante Pettis. Something that Armand Sardoui, our Niners guy here at HTF, brought up last night. So that could be what we see from San Francisco,
Yeah.
especially considering the fact that they're not picking until the middle of the draft on Saturday. They've got some time to kill.
Yeah, I think they're gonna try to trade their wide receivers and try to get a couple, at least get another one or two draft picks for day three, so you can maybe try to get like five, maybe try to squeak out 5 day 3 picks, so you at least have at least a busy day three.
Yeah, I mean, hey,
Or
if you get two day three picks added to the three you already have, that's a 7-person draft class, and that's a decent sized draft class.
Mhm. I think
Maybe
that's
they
what
only
they're.
trade one and they get six. I mean, yeah, I'm looking at this draft class though, starting with Kinlaw and Ayuk, and I'm thinking, I really like the Kinlaw pick. The Ayuk pick is questionable, and I think that again, I'm bringing up the theme of wide receivers. It doesn't matter where they go. It doesn't matter what round they're drafted in. It matters what team they go to. And Ayuk in San Francisco is not something that screams perfect fit to me. It
Yeah, I
considering the
think that
fact
was
that
literally
Kendrick
it.
Bourne is there, plays a similar position. That's kind of honestly a similar person. Like that's someone very similar that I see out of Ayuk is a guy like that. Obviously, and you also have Debo Samuel. So like Debo Samuel is the wide receiver one for this team. Um, so I just to me he's not going to get a chance to really be a star where he could have been at a different place. So I don't know. I think that Ayuk was a questionable decision at best, especially not someone you trade six picks for, or 2 picks to get. So I was surprised by the trade,
Yeah,
but
I think they could have gotten a different wide receiver at 31,
mhm.
or potentially could have still gotten him at 31. But I mean,
I
I
mean,
get
but
that they want to get their
Baltimore
guy
was. I think what they were thinking is Baltimore's going to pick him. Let's jump up from Baltimore.
or Green Bay
And they
or
weren't going
Green
to
Bay
trade with
maybe.
Seattle because they're in the division. Miami, they probably talked to Miami about trading up, but Minnesota was the most eager, so they did it with Minnesota. But another surprising trade was Green Bay from 30 to 26 to take Jordan Love. We were talking about, how some team needs to do it. Green Bay volunteered as tribute and has taken Jordan Love to be Aaron Rodgers' backup for the last part of his career.
I think that was
Say
it
it.
was shocking. It was shocking,
Yeah.
and I actually think this pick is this my personal opinion. I think this pick may end up causing Aaron Rodgers in the next year or two to request a trade
Request a
because
trade.
be-
Whoa.
because I believe Aaron Rodgers is going to lose faith in this organization. He feels that I think there were close reports that sources that were close to Aaron Rodgers felt that the Green Bay Packers organization betrayed him because they thought that he was going to get skill position players to help him now. And what did they do? They traded assets that they could have used in this draft to help Aaron Rodgers potentially to trade up for his replacement. That is maybe to him a stab in the back, and he may not want to play there much longer. Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen. That's
Yeah.
just my opinion. This is my opinion that what could happen.
So I believe they traded the 136th pick um, to Miami, and I believe that's all that it took. Just 136 and 30 to move up 4 spots. And that 136 is a middle fourth round pick. So not too much of a price to pay to trade up 4 spots. They were talking. Green Bay obviously wanted him. Matt LaFleur being a quarterback guy, Definitely, that's what he was going for. They were talking with Seattle about possibly trading up, is what we've heard, what we've learned. Green Bay, to me, I think it's a bit questionable. Maybe they are concerned with Aaron Rodgers and his durability, but I mean, look, Aaron Rodgers just took you to NFC Championship. Like
Mm-hmm.
that happened. I mean, I know it seems like forever ago with this pandemic and Corona and stuff, but I mean that happened only 3 months ago. Like he's still your guy, and he's
Yep.
under contract until 2023. That's 4 years.
Yep, and
That's
is
how long Jordan
why.
Love's contract is.
And that is why. And that is exactly why I could see that a trade happening maybe within 2 years, a year or two, because I think I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is fond of this. I don't know if he might lose. I think he might lose trust in his organization, and it's just like I may want to finish my career elsewhere. Maybe similar to what Tom Brady did. He lost faith because his organization was not giving him the weapons that he needed. So he decided to go elsewhere to a team that would give him that or has that already. And that could be something that a team like New England could be like, we might call you up.
Mm-hmm. That would be
Like,
crazy.
well,
That would be crazy.
I mean, that's not. I don't
I would
find
end
that
the simulation
completely
right there.
shocking. I don't call that completely shocking.
Yeah.
Because Green Bay has not been giving Aaron Rodgers the weapons he needs. He's not been giving that, and it's like Aaron Rodgers. It's just like I was one game away from the Super Bowl, and you're drafting a quarterback now. Like that, I think that is not going to sit well with him, and I think that is eventually going to get him out of there.
Yeah.
I think in 2 years, you can quote me right now. I think within 2 years, within 2 years, he will not be a Green Bay Packer.
All right, 2 years. You're giving Aaron Rodgers 2 years left. So, but I mean, look, some team had to draft him, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that they were concerned that a team like Indianapolis, a team that is also in a position to groom a quarterback like Jordan Love, it would have traded up. You know, the Colts hold the 34th pick in the draft, the second pick tonight, so they were in striking distance to move up and to snag Jordan Love before Green Bay could. So I think Green Bay did what they had to do to ensure that nobody else could get them, and he got in the right spot. Now, for me, I don't. I'm. It's obviously puzzling because you could say, oh well, why aren't you getting a receiver? I think with me, the receivers in this draft, in fact, the ones that are going to be the better receivers are actually going to be the ones coming out tonight in the second round, and we'll talk about the second round a little bit later. I do want to finish our analysis of the first round. Let's go to Seattle. Jordan Brooks, another big surprise. Not one single person put Jordan Brooks on a mock draft for HTF at any point, and I believe him and Edward Delaire were the only two players to never appear on an HTF mock of the first round. But Jordan Brooks is a Seattle Seahawks, Chris, and we were talking a little bit about it before we came onto the podcast, and you are happy with this pick. Explain why.
I'm happy with this pick because we get a linebacker in Jordan Brooks that is athletic. He's a lot quicker than some of the linebackers that we have. And his head coach at Texas Tech, Wells, he said that Brooks reminds him of Bobby Wagner. And guess what? He coached Bobby Wagner at Utah State. So he's got some credibility to say that because he's coached both. And he thinks this guy could be the next Bobby Wagner. And I guess when you're a Seattle Seahawks or front office and you hear that is going to come screaming to you potentially because it's like Bobby Wagner is a Hall of Famer, potentially first ballot Hall of Famer, and there is a lot of similarities. They both are tackling machines. I mean, Brooks had 367 career tackles at Texas Tech. That is an insane number for a 4-year start for a college player to have. because it's almost 90. That's almost on average 90 a season. That's a lot for a 12-game season. And I mean, this last season he had 108 tackles, 20 tackles for loss, which was one of the tops in the country, and he only had 3 sacks, which ironically all 3 of the sacks came in one game. Which, yeah, that is one thing that. But I like the pick. I think he could replace KJ Wright potentially, and I think he could be. I think he may be a day one starter for us. I think he is going to be a day one starter for us this year.
Chris, I love the optimism. I
And
always count on you for some optimism. But
I mean, yeah,
look, the reason why I think a lot of people are dogging on this pick is because of the fact that Jordan Brooks was probably also going to be available the next time Seattle picked, which I believe is 59, and he was picked at 27. So it's 32 picks.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
I did read stuff before the podcast. I did read stuff. What Mel Kiper had to say about this first round. He actually called Seattle a winner of this first round.
Interesting.
One of the top analysts called him a winner because Mel Kiper actually said that he was very close to putting Brooks in his first round. Like he thought highly of him. He thought very highly of him as a first round pick.
Yeah.
He didn't pull the trigger, but he said that this was a good pick for them because it fills that thin linebacking core.
It is, and with KJ Wright in the second half of his career, Bobby Wagner in the second half of his career, Seattle's a team that they like Las Vegas, except a better version, I guess. A team that doesn't really care where the player is as long as it's the player they want. So they get him at 27, and hey, we'll see who's laughing in a couple of years. But yeah. Baltimore goes and they get Patrick Queen, a guy that we thought could have gone to Seattle, but Patrick Queen was mocked to the Ravens in our HTF collective. Why Patrick Queen this late?
I think it was a combination of maybe fit and need, and I think you thought two teams off the bat were Saints and the Seahawks that potentially could get him. I felt like both of those teams just did not feel like. Apparently, the Saints weren't that he wasn't as high on the Saints board as we thought maybe. In Seattle, potentially, I think they just like Jordan Brooks fit more than Patrick Queen. I think that was a fit thing.
Yeah.
And then I think he just fell to the Ravens. I thought that was you would say a small steal potentially.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll say this. Patrick Queen just sounds like a Raven. He sounds like a Ravens player. You get what I'm saying, though.
Mm-hmm.
He sounds like he plays for the Ravens. What's your name? Patrick Queen. Definitely a Raven. But yeah, Patrick Queen. He addresses a need for Baltimore. Matt Judon is on the franchise tag. They needed some pass rush replacement for they lost Zadarius Smith a year ago, so they needed some reinforcements for that position. They got that here with Patrick Queen. I think this is a very good pick for Baltimore. Again, the rich get richer. That's all I got to say. But Tennessee here at number 29. They lose Jack Conklin in free agency, so they use their first pick to fill in that gap with Isaiah Wilson from Georgia. Not surprising that tackle was the position of need, but I think a lot of people thought this would be Ezra Cleveland or even Josh Jones. Why do you think it was Isaiah Wilson ultimately at the end of the day?
That might just be who they scouted more. And I think it might be who they scouted more, and they thought that would fit better. But I also really love what Kyle Coppertain said last night about potentially group of 5 people not going ahead of Power 5 people. This may have been a case of that because Cleveland and Jones both play for Power group of 5 teams in Boise State and Houston, while Isaiah Wilson plays for Georgia, an SEC team. That they maybe they scout them more, and they may not think as highly of those smaller school players.
Yeah. Only one player selected last night was not a Power Five, did not come from a Power Five school, and that was Jordan Love. So, I mean, 31 out of 32 Power Five players. I mean, that's not a huge surprise, but usually, like, if we look back at the 2019 draft, there were some players, I believe, um, that were like group of five players.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some players that come to mind. I'm looking at this list actually. Actually, now that I see it, I mean, the only one is Notre Dame, but I mean, but you also had Alabama State's Titus Howard, Houston Texans, and he turned out to be not
Mm-hmm.
bad himself. Um, so yeah, I guess you could say it's not something that we're not used to seeing. But I mean, I think the best example, at least from what we can remember from recent years, like Josh Allen from Wyoming,
Yep.
um, Marcus
At Oliver.
Davenport. Marcus Davenport was a first round pick from UTSA. Um, San Diego State, Rashad Penny. Mike Hughes from UCF. Go Knights, charge on.
At
So
Oliver.
yeah, Isaiah. Yeah, so it's normal. This wasn't a huge surprise that we saw this. It just appears to be a continuing trend. Um, so yeah, I think that definitely helps Isaiah Wilson's case in the group of five. Yet again, another reason why they reign supreme in the NFL draft and in the NCAA, and it's I'm kind of sick of it. but but let's move on now to number 30. This is Miami's third pick of the night. They go corner here. Interesting that they went corner. Obviously, trading Minka Fitzpatrick is why you have another pick in this draft. So they do go defensive back here with Noah Igbenogany out of Auburn. Not a lot of people knew who he was before last night, but I guarantee you Miami Dolphins fans know him now.
Yep, they certainly do, and I didn't. To be honest, I never put him on my mock
The
draft.
only person that I saw put him on any mock draft at any point throughout the draft process from hitting the field was in the alumni draft. Kyle Graham, shout out to Kyle Graham, put Noah Igbenogany at 22 to Minnesota. A little bit high,
He,
but the only
he,
player to
he got
ever
high.
put Igbenogany in any first round mock. So that's all that I saw. He was not expected to be a first round pick. Very few of the major analysts that all of us studied put him that high, but he was the fifth corner off the board in this first round. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I think what helps him, and Miami went and they got Byron Jones in free agency, so he's not going to be an outside corner, but he's built more to be in the slot, and he can also return. He's a return guy. He can return punts and kicks and stuff like that.
But I think that's like the added thing that he will give you. He will give you. He'll
I
he'll
mean, hey,
play two.
Mike Hughes. Mike Hughes
Yeah,
was, I believe, 29 overall,
yeah, he was. Yeah, late first round, but
late
yeah,
first
because
round.
he can return kicks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So look, I think yeah, he was number 30 overall. 30 overall, Mike Hughes. Uh,
Hey,
it's the third straight year. Maybe it's more than that. Let me look at 2017, but this is at least the third straight year. Yeah, it's the third straight year. T.J. Watt went 30 in 2017, so it's the third straight year a cornerback has been picked with the 30th pick.
that's
Mike
that's
Hughes in
a
2018,
little fun
DeAndre
fact.
Baker in 2019, and
Little
now
fun
Noah
fact.
Igbenogany in 2020.
Little fun fact.
Yeah,
The 30th pick likes the corners.
yeah. All right, now we move to number 31. Jeff Gladney goes to the Vikings here. Another first round cornerback for the Vikings. This is nothing new from what we've seen from Minnesota. They get Jeff Gladney here at 31. How did you feel about this pick?
I love it because I've had Gladney going to Minnesota for a while. Like in my mock drafts, last couple of months, it's been I've had Gladney going to Minnesota. I just think that's the fit. I think it's the perfect fit for him. He's a
Yeah.
big physical corner. could be the number one corner day one. I think day one number one corner potentially for them this upcoming season with along probably with Mike Hughes. I would assuming he's healthy. Mike Hughes has some injury problems, so I mean, Gladney is gonna he's gonna have his hands full as a rookie, having to guard number one wide receivers most likely. But I think he's fully capable of doing it. I mean, and with his size and his physicality, I thought that was a perfect fit.
Right. Yeah, Jeff Gladney was someone we've been mocking to Minnesota for a couple months now. It's a good fit considering the fact that Minnesota lost their top 3 corners in free agency. So Minnesota needed a corner. They got one. And not only did they get that, they got 2 extra draft picks on top of that. So Minnesota might have won the night. They were definitely one of the big winners last night. They got Justin Jefferson, a top 4 receiver in this draft. They got Jeff Gladney, a top 4 corner in this draft. So I think Minnesota fans should be very happy with the way things went last night and the way they're positioned later on in this draft. In fact, don't be surprised if they trade up, tonight for for like an edge rusher because they have the picks to do it, and edge rushers are widely available now because they have, they all fell. But now we get to 32, the last pick in the draft, the first running back off the board. What if I told you 6 months ago, Chris, in October, that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, let's say this right before the LSU-Alabama game, Clyde Edwards-Helaire would be the first running back off the board in the draft?
I would have told you you're dreaming. You're dreaming.
Well, dreams came true last night. Dreams came true last night. And Kansas City, the fastest offense in the NFL, got faster.
That was an interesting pick. And you know what interesting? You know what the interesting thing? After the draft, after the first round, they talked to Andy Reid and everyone, and they say he reminds them of a Brian Westbrook.
Yeah,
and could even be better than him potentially. Which when I hear that, I'm like, you're adding a potential Brian Westbrook type player to this offense. That would be scary. At first, I did not love the pick. After looking at all the scenarios and that the Chiefs don't pick again until for a while, they don't have a second round pick because that was Seattle in the Frank Clark trade. So it's like they don't pick again for a while. I'm guessing this was the guy that they've wanted. Even this is the guy that they've wanted. So you had to get the guy you wanted since you're not picking for a while.
Mm-hmm. I think that Kansas City, they have very few picks in this draft. They don't have a lot of needs to fill. Running back, although, is probably their most glaring need on offense, they definitely have more positions on defense that they need to fill. Cornerback was one of them. In fact, I think maybe if you look at, some of the corners, I'm surprised they didn't at least trade back for Edwards-Helaire because they could have gotten an extra pick or two. Maybe even just position themselves better for some of their picks. Because Edwards-Helaire would have been available early tonight. In fact, he probably could have been available at 42.
Yeah, I think so because I believe like DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor, those 3 were more sought after than him. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire was more of a situational guy. Mm-hmm. Which we just saw that he was the first running back taken because the situation fit him best.
Yeah, and so now we get to tonight, and I'm really looking forward to tonight. Friday is the day where teams win and lose the draft. So Chris, what are you most looking forward to tonight?
I am looking forward to the running backs. I'm looking forward to the really skilled positions like the running backs, the wide receivers, and the defensive backs. Because especially safety, because all the safeties are still available. Mm-hmm. Actually, which is hilarious. That every single safety is available.
All the tight ends are available.
There are a couple.
All but one of the running backs are available.
I mean, yeah, and then you still have a lot of great wide receivers
Yes.
available. I think you still have. I think there's a. I think there is a. I think, in my belief, there are still five wide receivers, at least five wide receivers in this that are available still that could have been first rounders other years.
I want you to make. Um, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing obviously what my Texans do tonight. They did not have a pick in this first round. The first of our 2 year giving of our pick to the Dolphins. But the Texans got a lot of good possibilities here. They could trade down. They could trade up. I'm curious to see how they move forward with their team. But give me a bold prediction for tonight.
A bold
Like
prediction.
a player that we all know that will be drafted tonight, and where do they go?
I'm going to say that Michael Pittman goes to the Jets.
Michael Pittman to
After
the
Sam
Jets.
Darnold.
Yeah, no, I really like that pick. When you talked to me about that a couple days ago, it really lit a light bulb in my head. So I definitely like that fit for the Jets and for Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman probably in my opinion the best receiver left on the board. Who is the best three players on the board right now? Just quickly,
Best three players.
No need for a explanation. Just who are the three best players at any position available right now?
I am gonna go with the best player available right now, in my opinion, is I'm gonna go Antoine Winfield
Mm-hmm.
at number one. I'm gonna go Jalen Johnson at number two, and I'm gonna go DeAndre Swift at three.
Yeah, and I would expect those guys to go probably in the first 10 picks tonight. I think all those guys have really strong careers ahead of them. Could have been first round picks in any other year. For me, I think that just to say something different from what you said, the receivers tonight are gonna pop off that board really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Laviska Shenault should be drafted tonight. T. Higgins should be drafted tonight. KJ Hamler should be drafted tonight. Pittman should be drafted tonight. Denzel Mims should be drafted tonight. That's at least five receivers that should go in the second or third round. Chase Claypool could be drafted tonight. That's six.
Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Donovan Peoples-Jones could be drafted tonight. Yeah, that's seven.
Andy Golden. Don't forget about him. I think he is going to be a steal if you get him later. If you get him in the third day.
And last thing, we need to honor UCF in some way, shape, or form because we are affiliated with University of Central Florida. Which, quickly, where I'm just gonna list all the UCF available players, and you're gonna tell me where you think they're gonna go in the draft. Start with Gabe Davis. What round do you think he's going to go in?
Third
round. So that's tonight.
I think he gets drafted tonight. I think there's
awesome.
such a need at wide receiver tonight, and I think he is.
That'd be awesome. What about Adrian Killens?
I think he's undrafted.
Undrafted. Yeah, me too. I think maybe a seventh round if a team wants to take a chance on a speedy guy. Jordan Johnson.
Johnson. Maybe a seventh.
Seventh at best. Undrafted is more likely. Brendan Hayes.
I think undrafted.
I actually think we could see him sixth, seventh, undrafted. Nate Evans.
I think he could be a sixth. I think he could be a sixth.
That would be awesome if he could be a sixth round pick. That'd be awesome. I think that's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, he goes undrafted. Neville Clark.
I think he is the second best chance to be drafted after Gabe Davis. I think Neville Clark is a fifth or a sixth.
I think we could see Neville Clark go as early as the fourth, and as late as the seventh. I think he does get drafted. I agree with you. And then lastly, Richie Grant.
I think he could be very late. But I think he could get drafted.
I think he could go in the fifth round.
Yeah, I could see that. I see him as a late round pick. Definitely a day. Definitely, everyone's a day three. I think Gabe Davis is a day two. Everyone else would be a day three. But yes, I think Gabe Davis, Richie Grant, and Neville Clark are the top three.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Gabe Davis could go as early as tonight. where would you like to see him play in order for him to get a chance to succeed in the NFL?
You know what? And this might be just biased by me, but I would love for him to go be in Seattle
Yeah, but
because
he's not gonna get playing time in Seattle, Chris.
I no. But the thing is, I don't really see him as a two. I don't even see him more as a number three receiver, which he definitely could be a three receiver for us after Metcalf and Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, but you know what? I actually think there's a place for him that I think he could be really, really strong in. The Washington has the 66th overall pick tonight in the third round. They have the 108th pick in the fourth round. That's the second pick on Saturday.
Okay.
I could see him going either of those spots, and he could be strong for Washington.
I could. Okay.
Washington's a team that
argue,
needs receivers.
that.
They don't have a pick until the third round, so they will probably go for a receiver in the third round. If not the third round, then definitely the fourth. I really like what they could do, what he could do with a team like Washington.
I will give you a second one. The New York Jets.
Yeah, the Jets as well. It'd be awesome to see him paired up with Rashad Perriman. That'd be awesome. But anyway, that's all the time we have for this episode of the HTF podcast. Chris Wolf, it's a pleasure, man. Always talk football with you. But yeah, so even though last night was our last major show of the season, our last live show of the season, we will be continuing the HTF podcasts throughout the month of May at least. Take Me Out to the Podcast will be back with a new episode soon. Hitting the Crew will continue its new episodes. And the HTF podcast, of course. We will be back throughout the next week on Monday with a Last Dance recap, and sometime in the middle of next week with draft recaps. We will do an AFC podcast recapping everything from the AFC teams, and an NFC podcast breaking down every draft class from the NFC teams. So, Chris, I'll probably talk to you then on one of those podcasts. But thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the HTF podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Hitting the Field, and you can also subscribe to all of our YouTube to our YouTube channel at Hitting the Field, where we have all of our episodes of our podcasts, our main show Hitting the Field, our Might I Add. We recorded the Might I Add finale a couple days ago, so go check that out as well. We talk about our favorite UCF memories. And, of course, last night's draft show. If you want to relive the NFL draft from last night, be sure to do it with us at Hitting the Field on our YouTube channel. So, again, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the flip side.